And yep, it showed because they didn't move forward because I didn't take the time to go through and listen to their needs.
This is the Sales Babble Podcast, episode 365, Selling Well by Caring Well, an interview with Andrew Millar.
Welcome to Sales Babble, the podcast that shares selling secrets for non-sellers. And now your host, Pat Helmers.
Hello, Sales Babblers. This is Pat Helmers. And you know, guys, I really care about you. I really, really care about you. Just like you should really, really care about your customers. In this episode, we meet Andrew Millar. He's a franchise sales specialist at iFix. You know, that's one of those companies that fixes telephones and iPads and things like that, and I've broken a number of them over time. And more often than not, I take it to iFix. Well, anyway, in this episode, Andrew and I talk about the selling profession and why clients don't care until you care. We talk about how listening matters and that you sell well when you care well. It's all about building relationships. This is an episode chock full of great, actionable advice. And so, with no further ado, let's get to it. Welcome, Andrew. Are you ready to babble?
Patrick, I am ready to babble, sir.
Andrew, you are from iFix.
Yes, sir.
I'm very familiar with this company.
Okay, from breaking devices?
I break devices often.
We are in good company. I'm a customer of iFix as well.
Screens I've broken. I've had batteries replaced. I finally kind of gave up on actually, I'm holding one of my old phones right now. I kind of gave up on it and went and bought a new one about a month ago.
Good for you. Good
for
you.
iPhone. But I think you guys have done a great job in bringing back to life devices that otherwise would have gone to the grave.
Yeah, iFix, it was not something I studied for. Like I did a master's in sports science in Scotland, where I grew up for 25 years. Moved over here in 2015. And it was kind of through a friend who's the controller for iFix mentioned they were in expansion mode, Patrick, back in 2017 when I joined the company 4 years ago. In Europe, where I'm from, in Scotland, there's no brand. It's usually a kind of a store in a mall you have to go to, and I don't know. It didn't always have the best feeling or experience from those sort of stores. So I was really impressed that there was a brand that had the same consistency, whether you're in New York, Chicago, West Coast, wherever you are in the US. It's consistently the same experience you get with that company.
I understand what that means because I remember in 2016, I had a cracked case, and I was in Hanoi, Vietnam.
Oh, wow.
And I bought a new case for it, and the guy was looking at my screen, and he goes, I could fix that for like $5 or something.
Gotcha.
And I'm like, it looked a little sketchy.
Yeah.
But I said, okay. Next thing he pulls out these fancy tools, and yanks it all off, and in 2 minutes, bam.
Wow,
my phone looked brand new.
That's awesome.
But it goes to your idea that I don't know how much I trusted him at the time. The average person wouldn't have done what I did.
Yeah, you're definitely braver than the average person for sure. Kudos for you for doing that, Patrick.
Well, this is really a sales podcast. We're here to talk about sales.
Yeah, let's dive into sales. I love it.
How did you get into sales?
Yeah, got into sales. So I got into sales when I actually moved to the United States. So prior to that, I was working in the sports industry, in management back in Scotland, not in sales at all. But when I moved here, I actually did a personal training degree, just having a sports background. So that was my first job, was in sales, was a personal trainer. Did that for about 6 to 8 months. I enjoyed it. But it definitely had its ups and downs in terms of people either needed it or they didn't need it. From there, I went to the construction industry. I went into a company locally, incredible company with roofing, siding, and was their business development officer for working with hotels that wanted, large $1 million projects. So that was definitely a different, I guess, sales for those on the call that have maybe got one specific background in sales. I've come from, I guess, a diverse range of selling, personal training, which is one-on-one or group sessions, to roofing and siding, which usually takes a month or two to get that client on board. And then finally, what I'm in now is franchising, which you guys heard of at the start. Franchising is definitely more relationship-based, making sure we're bringing on the right clients and owners to our brand, and vice versa. The owners coming on board typically take anywhere from 2 months, give or take, from the first conversation with our team to move forward. I've had people take 2 or 3 years, and they've taken their time. And so I think for me, it's definitely crafted, I think, my skill set, being in personal training, being in the construction industry, to where I am now. I'm very thankful for kind of my growth over the last, I would say, 5 or 6 years.
Where do people get selling wrong?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think a couple of things I've seen, even in my own experience, is one, not listening to the clients or the person in front of you's needs. I think sometimes assuming you've heard what they want can sometimes be maybe a barrier to getting that client or person on board with your product, whether you're selling a car, whether you're selling medical insurance, whatever it is you're selling or offering. Listening intently, maybe not taking notes in front of them. If that's the right scenario to do, Patrick, great. But making sure you listen to them, take down their feedback. Make sure you've taken that on board, because the amount of times I've done it in the past with like personal training, thinking somebody cares about a certain lesson I'm doing, and all they care about is losing certain poundage, or they've got a wedding coming up, and I just don't understand their needs, and then usually that person doesn't stay long term as a client. So that would be one. I think second too is, I hope I do this on a daily basis, is generally caring about the people I'm working with, in terms of, this is their next career path. They're investing, sometimes up to millions of dollars in a brand, whether it's McDonald's. For us, you break, I fix. So I think it's Theodore Roosevelt. I think he once said, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. I'm sure everyone's heard that in the sales industry. So generally caring and listening to someone's needs will then build up trust with that person. So you have to win, I think, favor. It's sometimes immediate. It's usually not. It's usually over time. And be patient. I think sometimes people think they can rush a sale, and they're maybe thinking about the next prospect they're working with, or that next car sale, whatever it is. Be patient. Give the person breathing space and room to talk about their needs. I would say that's kind of key things for takeaways to think about. It's just listen, care, and that will hopefully build up trust with that person you're working with.
Like, what do you mean by being patient? Could you give a concrete example of that?
Yeah, so with being patient, so if you are, let's say, emailing a client and you're wanting a decision by Friday, and you don't get that decision by Friday, calling on that Friday evening with all about the tone, I think, on the call. If you're talking to them, hey, Mr. Client, I've just seen over the years, and I've fallen into the trap where my tone's a little snappy. I'm like, hey, I'm hoping for a decision today, and I come across the wrong way, and that's not my intent. But I think in the back of my head, maybe whether my sales aren't as good that month or year, and I'm maybe a little bit I rush the process slightly. So being patient is, whether that client comes on board or not, if you've done the best job you can, you've listened to your client, you've taken your time to care for them, and you've provided the best knowledge of that product, don't feel bad, don't take it to heart if they don't move forward. So I think being patient means if you've given them a deadline of Friday, give them till Monday or Tuesday to respond back. If they're busy, it's Christmas time coming up now, don't feel the rush to have a response back. Be patient, trust your process will work. So that, I guess, that would be my best example in terms of the holiday season, Patrick, coming up now. If you don't get a response straight away, breathe, call them up maybe after the weekend's over to get a response on that product you're selling.
There's this balance, right? People also talk about you need to have a sense of scarcity, like time's running out, or we only got so many of these things. Of course, a lot of that scarcity, I think, is invented.
Yeah. I think more than ever, people had their guard up, Patrick, as consumers. So, I mean, you can research anything now within a couple of seconds on Google and type in sales approach, even as a consumer. So I think more than ever, I think it is more challenging for salespeople to, I think old school, you could do that. You could be like, hey, there's another buyer looking at this car or looking at this product. Well, now there's so many different car manufacturers and car retailers to buy from, and people starting their own car, man. And by the way, I love cars. I'm sorry to use that example. I think I've got friends who own car manufacturers locally in Florida, and own dealerships, I should say. And I guess for that, the balance is giving them a process and a time sequence to follow. If you have genuine interest in that other product you're selling, absolutely. I think it is, to your point, Patrick, there is a balance. Telling them, I think, in the process, by the way, Mr. Client, there is somebody else looking at this. I don't say that to rush you in your choice, but I also don't want to get a call in 2 weeks' time from you and you might have missed out on this opportunity. So just kind of a heads up now. And I always do that if there is, genuine interest. We typically have about 4 or 5 people looking at the same markets in the US at any given time in each state. So I always like to let the prospect know if there's other people moving forward faster. Don't feel rushed. Keep doing your research, but also be aware that time is of the essence. So I think it depends on what product you're selling. But yeah, there needs to be some form of urgency if somebody is dragging their feet for no reason.
This whole notion of patience seems to tie into what you were saying before about caring. That if you don't really care for the person, then you're going to take a very transactional view at the whole thing. Like they're just something in your pipeline. They're just a deal in your pipeline that you're trying to close.
Yeah.
Is that what I'm hearing? Is that what I'm hearing you saying?
Yeah. I mean, you're spot on. So, I think people pick up on that real quickly, I think. And I mean, I've fallen into this trap, I'm sure, more than I would like to admit.
Have you fallen into this? Is there an example where you've not cared for the person and lost a deal because of it?
Good question. Let me think. So when I was doing, definitely in the construction industry, it was more, we had great products to sell, but I would also maybe not take the time to go through every piece of the product, whether it was roofing I was offering or siding. And it was more of a, maybe it was a bit more arrogant on my side because I felt we were the best out there. So instead of giving 2-hour presentation to a group of people, I would rush it over a 30-minute window. And yep, it showed because they didn't move forward because I didn't take the time to go through and listen to their needs. So I've learned my lesson. I'm sure, again, there's times where I do rush it slightly, but there's a great book for those out there who are readers. I'm not the best reader, but I could definitely name a couple of good sales books. One it's by John Maxwell. It's called High Trust Selling. It's titled, If You're Serious About Selling, You Must Read This Book. It's a breakthrough for a lot of people that don't have a sales background. And that word trust, I know I've used it probably a lot today. It is about building trust with your clients, the people you're working with to sell that product, and just take time with the process.
How can you build trust? How do you go about building trust in prospective buyers?
So I think first off, I wouldn't say this is the most important, but is up there, is know your product. So if you come on board, of course, there's a learning curve with every aspect of your business when you first start off. And I felt that in every single industry I've worked in so far. But knowing your product, like doing the homework on what you're selling. If people ask you specific questions, if you don't know them, say, hey, I'll get back to you tomorrow on that. I'll ask our senior managers, whoever it is. But in being upfront, if you don't know the answer, be honest with that. I think that also builds up trust, Patrick, is sometimes you'll have a hard question and just winging it kind of saying, hey, I think this is right. And I think the consumer usually is like, this person doesn't really know 100% of their product, and I'm about to spend X amount of dollars on it. So that'd be one, know your product, know what you're selling. I think two, with trust, outside of that is, I've mentioned it already, listening. I think being engaging throughout the process, repeating back certain things they've said, super basic things to do. I think that pays off though. If somebody says something, is maybe recalling that 10 minutes later and said, hey, I know you mentioned that at the start. I think building rapport is crucial as well. If somebody's got, whether it's a sport that you guys both do, or you've gone away to a certain city. For me, I think I'm very fortunate because I'm from Scotland. There's a lot of people that have traveled to Europe, or they've got a granddad or somebody that's been to the UK, or their roots are from the UK or Europe. So I think building up, rapport and small talk early on leads to that trust level you want to build with your clients.
Interesting. I really believe that listening, I think what people are looking for is that you're authentic, that you're the real deal.
Yep. Agreed.
And if you're listening, they gauge that, hey, this person's interested in me. I like that. But when it comes to like product stuff, if someone honestly says, hey, I don't know, let me get back to you. I don't want to lead you astray or anything like that. I actually like that when people say that. Actually, it also gives you a reason to follow up.
Exactly.
Because the more you follow up, we haven't talked about that, but the more you follow up, the more likely you're gonna get a buyer.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you want to touch? Can I touch on the follow up process in a little bit of detail? Because I think it's changed for people with the pandemic in some industries.
Really, how so?
Yeah, so I think for us, we would meet prospects with our brand Ubrick iFix in person every 2 weeks in Orlando, where we're headquartered. Well, now with the pandemic, in some states, it's still challenging to travel. It's a lot more virtual calls, which I think everybody, like I'm working from home right now, a lot more emails too. And in person, we would give them a lot of information, like a package to give them. Well, now I think it's more email based than ever before with a lot of clients. So just having, I think, in your arsenal, whether it's articles to share with the products you're selling, hey, here's an update from December, of the product we're doing, this has been the best product in 2020 so far, sharing that with clients throughout the due diligence. It's like a touch point, whether it's once a week, every 2 weeks, best with your clients you're working with. So for me, if I'm working with a client, I've not had a chance to meet in person yet because it's hard with the pandemic to travel. A lot of it's more, hey, Mr. Client, here's an email of a study with electronic repair that was done last month. One that came to mind is people are using devices at their house more than ever before. The fridge, it's kind of funny, but the fridge used to be open 30 times a day on average. People working from home now, it's open 130 times a day on average. So devices are breaking more and more of wear and tear. So just things like that, I think, keep your clients you're working with engaged throughout their due diligence.
Yeah. These are troubling times. What other challenges have you faced?
Yeah, I think to your point, I think, Patrick, people not know the unknown for a lot of people can usually give pause, depending on what industry you're in. And I personally experienced this. I would say for just a month or two, I was very fortunate. I think people wanted to see around March, April, what was this all about? What should we be looking for? And I had a few prospective franchisees I was working with and said, hey, let's reconnect, in a few months. And most of them I reached out to were, I think come summer, we're more like, okay, I think, looking at this for 2021, let's, start to re-engage. But absolutely, there was definitely people that I think due to the pandemic were holding off to, I guess, see what the worst case scenario looked like. I guess for us, we're very fortunate to be in an industry, Patrick, that we talked about at the start. People have devices that need fixed, whether there's a recession That was our first store that opened up in 2009 that did really well through the recession. Whether, Amazon come out with a new product, we feel we're Amazon proof with the services we offer. It's really hard to duplicate, really good repair in less than 2 hours. And for us, we feel we're pandemic proof because when it got announced in March, this happening with the pandemic, Homeland Security said electronic repair was a necessity. There was some that was seen as a necessity because people have smartphones to call up their family, their loved ones. People need their phones back quick. So anyway, we've been very fortunate. We've still seen growth year over year. We're actually 30% above in our industry with uBreak iFix from last year to this year, which is just crazy with what's going on.
What do you do when you're not feeling it?
Great. I mean, this is one of my favorite questions. Having a process, and it might vary from month to month, year to year, depending on your personality, I think is the key part. Knowing what works for you. So for me, I'll usually go for a walk for half an hour. If I've had a few, maybe not so great calls with prospects and they've been challenging, I'll just go and clear my head and go for a walk and just get a breather. I'm a Christian. I'm a man of faith. And I think for me, just, on a spiritual thing, just, connecting with God, praying for a little bit helps me personally. But yeah, going for a walk, I think is one. I think two, if you're not having a great day, is kind of hit reset the next day, before you dive onto your first call. Maybe read an inspirational quote or two, maybe put on a sales, kind of inspirational video online. It sounds cheesy, but for me, it helps a lot hearing other people's struggles online and being like, man, I've been there. I was there yesterday. I think it's helpful. And then I think last but not least is I guess venting or speaking to your spouse, your family, whoever it is you connect with, or having a mentor in place and saying, mentor, I really am struggling right now with sales. What's kind of some one or two tips you can give me this month that can help. So surround yourself with people that are going to be positive influences, and have a mentor has always helped me kind of keep me grounded, whether I'm successful at the time or not so successful. That's been helpful for me. Hopefully that helps some of your listeners.
Before we go, is there some inspirational quote you bumped into in the last week or so that you could share?
Oh, wow. Put me on the spot. Any inspirational quote? Yeah, nothing really comes to mind apart from that one. I know it's old school. It's just that whole caring. People are so busy online shopping, and you have to remember everyone has their own, struggles. I think everyone, I know for me, I sometimes forget that, so knowing people are, maybe they're challenged themselves. Maybe they don't have enough finances for the product. So just giving people a breather, and that whole saying that I mentioned earlier, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. It's not a recent quote. It's just a quote I've used over the years that one of my mentors gave me early on. It's just care. Just make sure you care about the person in front of you, because it'll usually pay off. Whether that's a referral in the future for new products, your best hype people or your best advocates are usually your clients that talk to their family and friends.
Yeah. If people wanted to connect with you, Andrew, where would they go?
So they can reach out, usually by email. I know it's old school, but I'm always on my emails, a.miller@ubreakifix.com. Or if they just want to check out franchising with uBreak iFix, they can go on ubreakifix.com/franchising, fill out some information, and we can connect that way as well.
I'll make sure and place that link in your email on the show notes. Thanks a lot for visiting us here in Sales Babble and babbling today.
Yeah, Patrick, it was great being on today. Thank you so much, sir, for having me. I hope you have a great rest of your week.
I love that quote that he mentioned from Teddy Roosevelt. Nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. That's exactly right. It's all about being patient, not closing too quickly, not rushing the sale. Sure, if you want to have some urgency, it should be real. It shouldn't be manufactured. And above else, if the customer can feel that you care about them and that you're really there to genuinely help them and help their business, the likelihood of you closing a sale is so much higher. To connect with Andrew, you can find links at the homepage at www.salesbabble.com. And while you're there, if you have any questions about this episode or any others, click the Babble Me button, and that will send a message directly to me. Always open for your questions, always open for getting advice on how to make this podcast even better. Speaking of, if you enjoyed this episode, please like, share, and subscribe so that you never miss another episode. That's all I've got for this week. Until next week, take care and have a highly successful and a profitable selling day.
Thank you for listening to the Sales Babble podcast. Find us at www.salesbabble.com.
This is a production of Habanero Media.